In the quiet town of Chester's Mill, life proceeded as usual under the clear blue sky. The town, a small community with close-knit residents, was known for its tranquility and scenic beauty, surrounded by forests and lakes. Among these residents were Dale Barbie Barbara, an ex-military man trying to leave town quietly after a mysterious altercation, and Big Jim Rennie, a local councilman and used car salesman with a penchant for power. One ordinary day transformed into an unprecedented event as an invisible, impenetrable dome suddenly descended around the town's borders, cutting off all contact with the outside world. Cars crashed into the barrier, a plane collided spectacularly with it, and all electronic communications were severed, plunging the town into chaos. The initial reactions were a mix of panic and disbelief. Residents gathered along the barrier, touching and tapping it, bewildered by the force that made it unyielding yet completely invisible. Meanwhile, emergency services scrambled to manage the aftermath of the disruptions caused by the dome's appearance. Attempts to break through with tools, vehicles, and even explosives were futile, leaving the townspeople facing the reality of their new confinement. Barbie, finding himself unable to leave, took on the role of a reluctant hero, helping to coordinate rescue efforts and maintain order. As fear began to grip the town, his military background and calm demeanor made him a natural leader in this crisis. As the reality of the dome settled over Chester's Mill, the immediate impact on resources and communication became painfully evident. With all lines to the outside world cut off, the town's dependence on external supplies surfaced. Grocery stores were quickly overwhelmed by panicked residents stocking up on food, water, and essentials, leading to shortages and rising tensions among the community. Electricity and water systems, fortunately, remained operational, as they were sourced locally, but the inability to communicate with the outside world created an information vacuum that fueled fear and speculation. Town meetings were called by local government officials, attempting to instill some order and distribute information as best they could. In the midst of this chaos, Dale Barbie Barbara emerged as a key figure in maintaining calm and order. His military experience proved invaluable in organizing search and rescue operations for those injured during the dome's descent and in setting up communication channels within the town using radios and other means. Yet his presence and actions drew the attention of Big Jim Rennie, who saw Barbie's growing influence as a threat to his own authority. As supplies dwindled and the isolation became more real, the initial unity began to fracture. Small groups started to form, each with their own ideas on how to manage their new reality. Some called for strict rationing of food and essentials, while others, influenced by Big Jim's rhetoric, pushed for a more authoritarian approach to maintain control. Big Jim Rennie, seizing his opportunity, began to consolidate power, positioning himself as the town's savior. He used his influence and control over the main resources, such as the propane supply, which was crucial for power generation, to manipulate public opinion and fortify his position. The situation in Chester's Mill was rapidly evolving into a powder keg of desperation and power struggles, setting the stage for deeper conflicts and challenges as residents and leaders alike grappled with their new normal. As days turned into weeks under the dome, the power dynamics within Chester's Mill shifted dramatically. Big Jim Rennie, leveraging his access to the town's propane supply and his role as a councilman, began to assert control over the community with an iron fist. His manipulation of resources allowed him to curry favor with certain segments of the population, positioning himself as the de facto leader of the town. Jim's son, Junior Rennie, troubled and volatile, became the father's enforcer, using his position to settle personal scores and intimidate those who questioned his father's authority. This consolidation of power by the Rennies created a climate of fear and submission among many of the townspeople, who were already dealing with the stress and uncertainty of life under the dome. Amidst this growing authoritarianism, Dale Barbie Barbara found himself increasingly at odds with Big Jim. Barbie's efforts to maintain order and ensure fair distribution of resources made him popular among many residents, who saw him as a beacon of hope and a counterbalance to Big Jim's corrupt practices. This popularity only deepened Big Jim's resentment and paranoia, leading to a dangerous rivalry. The conflict between Barbie and Big Jim came to a head over a plan to manage the town's dwindling water supply. Big Jim proposed a scheme that would give him control over all water resources, supposedly to manage them more efficiently. Barbie, skeptical of Jim's motives, investigated the plan and discovered it was a front for Jim to monopolize power further and exploit the situation for personal gain. Barbie's attempts to expose Big Jim's corruption put him directly in conflict with Junior and the more fanatical supporters of the Rennie regime. Public meetings became battlegrounds for influence, with Barbie trying to rally the community to demand transparency and democratic control over the resources. As the power struggle between Dale Barbie Barbara and Big Jim Rennie intensified, the residents of Chester's Mill faced not only a political and social upheaval, but also the enigmatic nature of the dome itself. The community's focus began to shift as strange phenomena associated with the dome started to manifest, compelling both leaders and residents to confront the possibility that the predicament was far more complex than anyone had anticipated. Barbie, along with a group of local teenagers and Julius Shumway, the editor of the town's newspaper, began to explore the origins and purpose of the dome. Their investigation led them to discover that the dome seemed to react to certain actions and emotions of the townspeople, suggesting it was not merely a physical barrier, but something more responsive and potentially sentient. The group uncovered anomalies in weather patterns and electromagnetic fields within the dome. On one occasion, a massive storm spontaneously formed and dissipated within an hour, defying natural explanations. Another time, birds flew into the dome's surface and seemed to pass through momentarily before being repelled back, leaving the observers baffled. As these mysteries unfolded, a subgroup of teenagers who had experienced vivid dreams since the dome's arrival reported visions of a dark, ominous force at the heart of the dome. These dreams, dismissed by some as stress-induced hallucinations, began to form a consistent pattern, suggesting that the dome might be connected to something or someone with a specific agenda. The investigation took a significant turn when the group, following clues from the teenagers' visions, discovered a hidden panel embedded in the dome's surface. This panel, when activated, revealed cryptic symbols that none could decipher but appeared to be a form of communication or control mechanism. As the community grappled with these revelations, Big Jim saw an opportunity to exploit the situation. He proclaimed that the dome was a test of their faith and loyalty, using the phenomenon to strengthen his control over the frightened populace. He framed Barbie and his allies as threat to public safety, accusing them of inciting panic with their wild theories. As the mysteries surrounding the dome deepened, so too did the tensions within Chester's Mill. Big Jim Rennie's portrayal of Barbie and his allies as disruptors worked to fortify his grip on the town, but it also galvanized those who saw through his manipulation. The town became a battleground of ideologies, one faction viewing the dome as a supernatural challenge to overcome, led by Big Jim, the other seeking logical explanations and solutions, rallied by Barbie. Barbie's group intensified their efforts to decipher the dome's signals and understand its purpose. With Julia Shumway's help, they reached out to the broader community, sharing their findings and theories through a makeshift broadcasting system set up at the local radio station. These broadcasts, although jammed occasionally by Rennie's orders, became a beacon for residents craving transparency and truth. Meanwhile, Big Jim consolidated his power by declaring martial law under the pretext of maintaining order. He enlisted a group of loyalists, including some of the town's police officers and his son Junior, to enforce his rules. This private militia carried out raids on homes of those suspected of collaborating with Barbie, confiscating supplies and detaining key supporters to weaken Barbie's efforts. The discovery of a possible communication panel within the dome added urgency to Barbie's mission. Working with Joe and Nori, two teenagers who had experienced direct interactions with the dome, Barbie's team pieced together that the dome might be influenced by their actions and emotions. They hypothesized that positive collective action might influence the dome's behavior, possibly leading to its disappearance. As the group planned a public demonstration of unity, hoping to affect the dome, Big Jim orchestrated a countermove. He planned a large rally to reinforce the idea that the dome was punishment for the town's moral failings, which only he could redeem through strict governance. The day of these conflicting events marked a pivotal moment for Chester's Mill. As residents gathered, the dome reacted unexpectedly. A series of intense vibrations shook the town, cracking the dome's surface slightly, which both factions interpreted to support their beliefs. Big Jim saw it as divine confirmation, while Barbie viewed it as a scientific response to their actions. The vibrations and the slight cracking of the dome's surface marked a turning point in the town's ordeal. Both factions saw it as validation of their beliefs, but for Barbie and his team, it was a clear indication that the dome was responsive and possibly capable of being influenced or even removed. Fueled by this new evidence, Barbie's group intensified their efforts to find a way to communicate more effectively with the dome. Working with Joe and Nori, who seemed to have a unique connection with the dome, they experimented with different types of stimuli, hoping to elicit a more positive response. Their breakthrough came when they discovered that specific frequencies of sound appeared to cause reactions from the dome, suggesting a form of communication. Meanwhile, Big Jim used the dome's reaction to consolidate his power further, claiming it was a sign that their town needed to purge itself of dissent to please what he called the will of the dome. His rhetoric became more fervent, and his control more authoritarian, as he organized purges of those deemed non-believers or threats to his vision of unity under his rule. As the political pressure mounted, Barbie's team made a critical discovery. The dome seemed to react not just to physical stimuli, but also to collective emotional states. They hypothesized that if the town could unify in a positive emotional outpouring, it might influence the dome to cease its confinement. They planned a massive coordinated action to test this theory, needing the support of as many townspeople as possible. This plan required careful and secretive coordination, as Big Jim was on high alert for any activities that might undermine his authority. Using the radio station and word of mouth, Barbie's team spread the word about a town-wide event meant to demonstrate unity and positivity. The day of the event, emotions ran high. As the townspeople gathered, Big Jim deployed his forces to disrupt the gathering. The confrontation was inevitable. As both sides clashed, the dome began to react, its surface shimmering and pulsating more intensely than before. The atmosphere in Chester's Mill was electric as the confrontation between Big Jim's enforcers and Barbie's supporters reached a fever pitch. As the townspeople gathered, attempting to unify their emotions and hopes and positivity, Big Jim's forces moved in to disperse the crowd, wielding threats and physical force. The tension that had been simmering for weeks was about to explode into outright conflict. In the midst of this chaos, the dome intensified its activity. The surface began to glow, pulsating with light that seemed to respond directly to the increasing emotional intensity below. As the conflict escalated, so did the reactions from the dome, until it reached a critical point that forced everyone to pause. The entire surface of the dome lit up with a blinding light, and a deep, resonant sound filled the air, silencing the crowd and halting the conflict. In this moment of stunned quiet, the dome's response became a catalyst for change. The townspeople, their attention now undeniably captured by the phenomenon above, experienced a collective epiphany. The realization that their emotions and actions might be influencing the dome shifted the mood from conflict to curiosity and unity. Even Big Jim's most loyal followers began to question the path of violence and control he had led them on. Barbie seized this moment to reinforce the message of unity and hope. He implored the town to come together, not just for their survival, but for the sake of understanding what the dome was teaching them. Moved by the undeniable evidence of the dome's responsiveness, the crowd began to unify, their shared emotions shifting palpably. As the emotional tide turned, so did the dome's activity. The light softened, the pulsing slowed, and for the first time since its appearance, the dome began to lift. Inch by inch, it rose, as if buoyed by the collective spirit of the town's newfound harmony. As the dome ascended and eventually disappeared, it left behind a town forever changed. The barriers, both physical and metaphorical, that had divided them were gone. Big Jim, seeing his power and influence evaporate with the dome, was left isolated and powerless. With the disappearance of the dome, the residents of Chester's Mill found themselves in a new reality. The barriers that had confined them physically and divided them socially were gone. A sense of relief and celebration spread through the town, but it was tempered by the recognition of the challenges ahead. The town had been forever altered by its ordeal, and the process of rebuilding both the community and its relationships would be complex. In the immediate aftermath, the power dynamics of the town shifted dramatically. Big Jim Rennie, once the self-proclaimed leader under the dome, found himself ostracized by the community. His manipulative and coercive tactics, which had once kept him in power, now served as a stark reminder of how fear and control could tear a community apart. Facing a loss of support and credibility, he was eventually held accountable for his actions in a town meeting, where the community decided to pursue formal charges for his abuses of power. Barbie, who had emerged as a leader committed to unity and transparency, played a crucial role in the town's recovery efforts. He helped to establish a new council that was more representative of the town's population and worked to ensure that the mistakes of the past were not repeated. His leadership during the dome and after solidified his position as a respected figure committed to the well-being of Chester's Mill. The town's recovery was documented and shared with the world, becoming a story of resilience and transformation. Scholars and psychologists studied the effects of the dome on the community, using Chester's Mill as a case study in trauma and collective psychology. The residents themselves became more bonded, their shared experience under the dome serving as a powerful catalyst for community cohesion. As Chester's Mill rebuilt, there were efforts to maintain the lessons learned from the dome. Annual commemorations were held to remember the ordeal and to celebrate the unity that eventually freed them. These events served as reminders of the power of community and the importance of resilience. The town also focused on rebuilding its infrastructure and economy, leveraging the attention and sympathy it had garnered to attract new residents and businesses. Over time, Chester's Mill not only recovered but began to thrive, becoming a symbol of hope and renewal for other communities facing their own crises.
Retreat!